The Lazic War began in 541 AD, when the Lazi, under their king Gubazes II, defected from Byzantine rule to ally with Persia. The Persians quickly took control of Lazica. However, upon learning that the Persians intended to kill him, deport his people, and replace them with Persian colonists, Gubazes sought assistance from the Byzantines. In 554, the Persians achieved a significant victory against the Laz-Byzantine forces at Telephus, forcing them to retreat to the western regions of Lazica. The following year, the Persians successfully defended against a Byzantine assault on the fortress of Onoguris. By the spring of 555, Persian General Nachoragan seized the initiative and besieged Phasis, a major Laz-Byzantine stronghold located at the mouth of the Phasis River. Nachoragan led an army of approximately 60,000 men in the Siege of Phasis. The Byzantine defense was commanded by Martin, the Magister Militum per Armenium, and his deputy Justin, the son of Germanus. The Byzantine forces, numbering fewer than 20,000 men, were significantly outnumbered. Given that Phasis and its fortifications were constructed mainly of wood, which was susceptible to fire, Nachoragan anticipated an easy victory. The town of Phasis was strategically located between the Black Sea and the Phasis River, providing natural defenses on its eastern, northern, and western sides. The southern side was protected by a moat, which Nachoragan's forces managed to drain after several days of strenuous labor. Additionally, they surrounded the town from the riverside by constructing a bridge of boats across the Phasis. The Byzantines organized their defenses meticulously. Justin guarded the extreme western side near the river, while Martin took position at the southwestern side. The southern side of the fortifications was defended by Angelus, Theodore, and Philomatheus. Angelus commanded a regiment of Moorish peltasts and spearmen, likely armed only with shields and lances. Theodore led the heavy infantry composed of Tsani, a recently Christianized tribe from the mountains above Trapezus. Philomatheus commanded Isaurian slingers and dart throwers. The southeastern side was defended by Gibris, who led a mixed force of Heruli and Lombards. Valerian, with troops from the Praetorian Prefecture of the East, though their exact composition is not recorded, guarded the extreme eastern side. Finally, Byzantine ships were protected by Dobrodzes the Wend and Elmingir the Hun. Nachoragan soon advanced on the town with his entire army, intending to engage in light skirmishing and missile discharges from a distance. His goal was to test the Romans' resolve and provoke them into an open battle, thus allowing him to determine the most effective tactics for the next day's confrontation. As the Persians approached within shooting range, they began their customary practice of launching volleys of arrows. This resulted in many Romans being wounded. Some continued to defend the walls, while others withdrew from the fighting altogether. Despite Martin's strict instructions for the entire army to remain at their posts and fight from a secure position, Angelus and Philomatheus, along with approximately 200 of their troops, opened the gate in their section of the wall and launched a sortie against the enemy. Theodorus, the commander of the Xanian contingent, initially tried to restrain them, criticizing their rashness. However, when they ignored his warnings, he reluctantly joined them to avoid accusations of cowardice and to not appear as though he was disguising his true intentions with a facade of prudence and good sense. Although he did not support the venture, Theodorus resolved to follow it through to its conclusion. In fact, Angelus, Philomatheus, and their men would almost certainly have been annihilated on the spot if not for a fortunate miscalculation that saved them. The Daylamites, positioned in battle formation at that location, observed the small number of attackers and calmly awaited their approach. As the Romans drew near, the Daylamites encircled them by maneuvering their wings around. Surrounded on all sides, the Romans abandoned any hope of inflicting harm on the enemy. Indeed, even the prospect of escaping seemed almost too much to hope for. Forming themselves into a compact group, the Romans suddenly turned and charged with their spears leveled at the enemy forces near the town. Witnessing this desperate charge, the Daylamites immediately opened their ranks, unable to confront men who appeared to care neither for their own lives nor for the consequences of their actions. This allowed the Romans to rush back to safety without opposition. Once inside the fortifications, they quickly slammed the gate shut behind them. The outcome of this hazardous exploit was negligible. They had risked their lives merely to save themselves, with no strategic gains achieved. Meanwhile, an army of porters on the Persian side had been laboring for an extended period to fill in the moat. Their efforts were now complete. All gaps had been filled and all holes plugged. Their work was so thorough that even a besieging army could walk over the area and bring up siege engines with minimal difficulty. No other significant events occurred that day, and at nightfall, Nachoragan returned to camp with his troops. Martin devised a strategic deception aimed at boosting the morale of his soldiers and instilling fear in the enemy ranks. He called for an assembly of the army under the pretense of discussing further defensive measures. During the assembly, an unidentified individual posing as a messenger from Constantinople interrupted proceedings. This supposed messenger conveyed the contents of a fabricated imperial message to the assembled troops. The message praised the defenders for their valor and falsely declared that reinforcements were en route, encamped near the river Neocnus in close proximity to the town. Martin, feigning outrage at the prospect of newcomers sharing in the glory earned by those who had endured the hardships of the siege, elicited vocal approval from his troops, who were thus motivated to action. The news of the supposed relief force quickly spread and became widely known. Soon, rumors circulated among the Persians themselves that a second Roman army had arrived near the banks of the river Neocnus and would imminently join forces with the besieged garrison. This unexpected development left the Persians stunned and deeply apprehensive, especially considering their own fatigue from enduring countless hardships throughout the prolonged siege. Reacting swiftly to the rumor, Nachoragan dispatched a sizable detachment of Persian cavalry to patrol the anticipated route of the non-existent relief force. Their mission was to secure strategic positions and lie in ambush, intending to surprise the Romans when they least expected it and hinder their progress until the besieged city surrendered. This diversion of Persian forces to a fruitless task was significant. Nevertheless, driven by a desire to preempt any arrival of the imagined relief force, Nachoragan promptly led his main army out and boldly advanced against the Romans. He openly boasted and swore that he would set fire to the entire city that very day. His excessive confidence seemed to cloud his judgment, as he appeared to forget the inherent uncertainties of war, where victory and defeat can swiftly alternate, and where ultimate outcomes are often shaped by higher powers. In his arrogance, Nachoragan even instructed laborers and menials, who were scattered in the forest gathering firewood or repairing siege engines, that upon seeing smoke rise, they should cease their tasks and rush to join him in spreading the flames. He envisioned a scenario where a single conflagration would engulf everything. Emboldened by such grandiose ideas, he launched his attack. While Nachoragan was devising his strategy, Justin seized the opportunity presented by the lull before the impending battle. Leading a select group from Martin's troops and his own, along with a contingent of 5,000 cavalry, he departed from the city after preparing them for combat. Their destination was a nearby church renowned for its sanctity. The troops marched in disciplined order, with standards held high, executing the operation with precision. The Persians were unaware of Justin and his forces departing, just as Justin's men did not observe the Persians advancing for their attack. The Persian forces approached via a different route and launched a sudden assault on the city walls. They intensified their barrage of arrows in an attempt to instill greater fear among the Romans and swiftly capture the city by storm. Missiles rained down incessantly, volley after volley, so densely that the air around grew dark, resembling a fierce blizzard or a violent hailstorm. Meanwhile, siege engines were brought forward, hurling firebrands and attacking the wooden wall with axes under the protection of wicker roofs. The wooden structure of the wall made it particularly vulnerable to such assaults. Others worked to undermine its foundations, aiming to collapse the entire edifice. Yet the Romans defending the towers and battlements offered spirited and vigorous resistance. Their determination to prove themselves capable of defending without a relief force was evident. Martin's strategic deception proved invaluable, motivating every man to exert utmost effort and employ every possible defensive measure. They showered javelins upon the unprotected masses of Persians, inflicting numerous wounds that could hardly be deflected. Large stones crashed through the penthouses, while smaller ones from slings shattered Persian shields and helmets, effectively discouraging them from approaching too closely to the wall. Some Roman troops stationed in ships used their bows with deadly precision, causing heavy casualties from their elevated positions. Others expertly operated catapults, launching feathered darts with tremendous force and range, striking down many advancing Sassanid soldiers long before they could pose a threat. Amidst the escalating chaos, shouts and martial trumpet calls resounded from both sides. The Persians beat drums and shouted louder, seeking to instill fear, accompanied by the neighing of horses and the resounding clash of shields and breastplates, creating a cacophonous and intimidating atmosphere. Returning from the church, Justin, son of Germanus, discerned the tumultuous noise and immediately rallied his cavalry. Organizing them in disciplined formation with standards raised high, he reminded every man of their mission ordained by Providence: to surprise and intimidate the enemy, forcing them to abandon the siege. Advancing swiftly, they spotted the Persians assaulting the walls. With a sudden shout, they charged at those positioned along the wall facing the sea, their lances, pikes, and swords slashing through Persian ranks. They relentlessly pushed back the enemy with their shields, disrupting their formation and ultimately breaking their resistance. Believing that Justin's cavalry was the anticipated relief force that had evaded their ambush and reached the besieged city, the Persians panicked and began to retreat in disarray, closing their ranks in confusion. Meanwhile, the Daylamites, stationed near the middle of the wall, caught sight of the turmoil unfolding. Leaving only a few behind, the majority rushed to aid their comrades in distress. Observing the diminished numbers of the Daylamites left at the wall, Roman commanders Angelus and Theodorus seized the opportunity and launched a sudden sortie from the city with a sizable force. They swiftly engaged and defeated the first group of Persians, then pursued those who fled relentlessly. Witnessing this, the remaining Daylamites, initially on their way to assist the beleaguered Persians, abruptly turned back. They were convinced that their priority should be to aid their own kin, and rushed back with frantic haste, more resembling panicked fugitives than an advancing army. The sight of the Daylamites in apparent disarray led the nearest segment of the Persian army to conclude that they were fleeing in the face of overwhelming danger. Succumbing to a sense of impending defeat, this Persian contingent also fled in shame, scattering in all directions. What had been a feared retreat became a stark reality. In turn, the Daylamites, misinterpreting the Persians' flight as a signal of defeat, joined them in their panicked retreat, thus perpetuating a cycle of misunderstanding and confusion where they became both the cause and victims of mutual misconceptions. During these events, a substantial number of Roman troops surged forth from behind their fortifications, turning the Persian retreat into a chaotic rout. They pursued closely, cutting down any stragglers and engaging vigorously with the remaining enemy forces who still held formation. While the left wing of the Sassanid forces visibly disintegrated, their right wing remained intact and fought fiercely in a rearguard action. Additionally, the elephants deployed by the Persians acted as a formidable defensive barrier, charging at the Roman infantry and repeatedly disrupting their formations. Mounted bowmen on the elephants' backs inflicted significant casualties on the attackers, their elevated position granting them precise targeting advantage. Meanwhile, Persian cavalry units continually sallied forth, harassing the Roman foot soldiers who were encumbered by their heavy armor. This relentless pressure compelled the Romans on that flank to yield ground and retreat hastily. Amidst the chaos, a member of Martin's bodyguard named Ogneris found himself trapped with no escape possible. Faced with a charging elephant, he took a desperate chance and struck the beast with his spear just above the brow, embedding the point deeply. The enraged elephant, driven wild by the spear dangling in front of its eye, began to thrash about, turning in circles and striking out with its trunk. This violent reaction resulted in the elephant tossing Persian soldiers into the air and trampling those it threw off its back. The maddened elephant wreaked havoc, instilling terror and confusion throughout the Persian ranks. Horses panicked at the sight of the frenzied animal, throwing off their riders and causing further disarray. The air filled with cries of panic and lamentation as soldiers jostled and elbowed each other in a desperate attempt to escape. In the ensuing chaos, many were accidentally killed by their own comrades. Taking advantage of the turmoil, the Roman forces, both those behind the walls and those who had previously sallied forth, joined together to form a single phalanx. Strengthening their front line with a continuous wall of shields, they launched a decisive charge against the disorganized Persians. Exhausted from their earlier efforts, the Persians were unable to withstand the Roman onslaught and fled in disarray, scattering in all directions without attempting to maintain formation. Nachoragan, bewildered by the sudden turn of events, also retreated, signaling with his whip for his troops to flee as fast as possible, which they were already doing. His earlier boastful predictions were completely contradicted by the reality of their defeat. The Romans pursued and continued to kill the retreating Persians until Martin, deeming that enough had been achieved, signaled a retreat to check their bloodlust. By nightfall, the Persians had reportedly lost at least 10,000 soldiers, primarily from the Pagan forces, along with most of their siege equipment. Byzantine casualties did not exceed 200. The Romans set the abandoned siege equipment on fire. Mistaking the smoke for a sign that the city had fallen, the servants and porters of the Sassanid army rushed towards the Byzantine lines, resulting in nearly 2,000 of them being killed and others captured. Nachoragan, facing logistical challenges and the approaching winter, decided to end the siege and withdraw his troops the following day. They moved towards Kotais and Mocher Isis, while Sasanian reinforcements arrived too late to alter the outcome and subsequently retreated. This allowed Byzantine forces to secure control over the western districts of Lazica uncontested. Nachoragan then led his troops into Caucasian Iberia for the winter. Upon learning of this setback, Persian Shah Khosrow I expressed strong displeasure towards his general. According to historian Agathias, Khosrow imposed severe consequences on Nachoragan as a deterrent against abandoning Persian interests.